In 1912, the mighty Titanic struck an iceberg in the middle of the North Atlantic and sank at 2:20 a.m. with approximately 1,500 victims. Within 10 days, musicians began writing songs and publishing them about the disaster to be shared in homes or for public performances or even recorded in some occasions. Over 100 were published in the United States alone and many more in the UK and across Europe. Titanic quickly became the most written about musical subject in American history. Most of these songs were sincere, but some of them were indeed exploitative, just trying to cash in on the disaster. Many of these songs you cannot find online. You can very rarely find the sheet music. You can't find recordings. They usually do not exist in vintage recordings, on records, or even on YouTube or iTunes. In most cases, these songs have never been recorded. We assembled a small collection of these pieces, original sheet music, and we are going to be performing them for you guys in the 1912 fashion. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce James Penka, who is a key part of our team with Titanic, Honor and Glory. He is going to be the lead voice actor of the main character, Owen Robert Morgan, and he also played Robin in Demo 3.
Yeah.
So, Jim, why don't you say a few words about yourself and then introduce our artists over here.
Absolutely. So, my name is James Penka. I've been a part of the Titanic Honor and Glory project for about 5 or so years now. And this is one of my favorite things I've been able to work on with Tom, Matt, and everybody. Putting together old pieces of music is almost like a time capsule. The music notation is pretty much unchanged over the years, over the centuries. And so finding a song from 1912 is just as easy as playing a piece from today. Helping us sing these tunes and speak these tunes, as you will see in a second. I have two friends here today who are working with me in Vermont here. Carrick Osborne and Caitlin Doak. Caitlin will be singing one of the more beautiful tunes in the set, and Carrick will be speaking one, which is going to be very fun because it's a lost art form, the speaking descriptive skit. And then also playing piano for all of our songs this afternoon is the wonderful Jake Tursky, a dear friend of mine.
I have mentioned that all of these pieces are indeed original antique sheet music. However, this one is the only exception to that rule. But we would be remiss to omit this piece. It does have a little bit of added authenticity to it, though, which I think you'll be appreciating. English musician John T. Gardner wrote a polka march specifically for the White Star Line. The song was available on board every White Star liner from the date of the song's publication onward, including the Olympic and the Titanic. The exact date of publication is uncertain, but on the cover art we see 3 steamers. 2 of them have full sail rigging. One is likely the Oceanic or the Atlantic. The top one appears to be the newest of these 3 ships, perhaps the Teutonic or the Majestic. With the assumption that this cover would showcase their top-of-the-line ships, we can assume that this would have been published shortly after the acquisition of the most recent ship here at the top, dating this piece to the early 1890s. There are a handful of recordings on CD, and even listed here on YouTube, claiming to be the White Star Line March, but this is incorrect. In the 1990s, musician Ian Whitcomb compiled a book of sheet music and later an audio album of music played on the Titanic. In his research, he came across this song, but in his own words, he says he did not like the original piece and therefore rewrote it entirely. He still credits the original musician, J.T. Gardner, as the writer. It is this rewritten version from the 1990s that is often cited as the original, and covers are done and people perform it with the assumption that it is the historical piece. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the original White Star Polka March, as never publicly played since the days of the White Star Line themselves.
We're going to start with our first of the musical pieces about the shipwreck, Just As the Ship Went Down, by Edith Lessing, music by Bernie Adler and Sidney Gibson. Edith was born in the 1800s, but according to the Los Angeles Herald, she was arrested in 1921 after taking on the identity of a high priestess on her property. She was actually in a love cult, so that's the only information we can find about Edith. Bernie worked with Irving Berlin on a few pieces, including That Dying Rag in 1911. So that's the only information we can find about the authors of these works. And we're going to have James come up and perform this piece. So James, come up here. Take it away, please.
Thank you, Matt. So, Just As the Ship Went Down, from a musical perspective, is my favorite of the songs that we've learned for today. That's why we're starting off with it. It's just actually a pretty well-written song, and like you will see with all the other pieces, Near My God to Thee is incorporated into the ending. Almost all of them used it in some way, either the American or British versions. And I think this one does it pretty close to the best. One of the later songs does it even better. But yeah, so this is one of the better tunes of the group, and it was a lot of fun to learn. So let's do it, Jake.
A cold, dark night, a sea of ice, a ship out on the ocean, all fitted out by man's device. She rode in perfect motion. A jar, a crash, a fearful clash, a sound like awful thunder, the dying groan, the living moan, as the splendid ship went under. Out on the sea when the ship went down, out where the lifeboats rocked, husbands were parted from loving wives, captain and sailors, they gave up their lives. Wireless rang with the awful news, by which the whole world was shocked. Out on the sea near eternity, where the angry waters frown, nearer, my God, they sang, just as the ship went down. The sky grows black, the icebergs crack, and death hangs o'er the water. But women first, the orders rang, for mother and for daughter. A cry, a shriek, but who can speak? For then the waters parted, the sea was cleft, and what was left for the living broken-hearted? Out on the sea when the ship went down, out where the lifeboats rocked, husbands were parted from love. wise. Captain and sailors, they gave up their lives. Wireless rang with the awful news, by which the whole world was shocked. Out on the sea near eternity, where the angry waters frown, nearer, my God, they sang, just as the ship went down.
So this next song is My Sweetheart Went Down with the Ship, one of the more melancholy, sadder songs of the group. It's words by Roger Lewis and music by F. Henry Klickman. Not too much info on Roger Lewis, but Klickman was born in 1885, and his career sort of began with this piece. He gained a lot of success, a lot of notoriety in the First World War, writing anti-war music. Through the 20s, he was working for some of the largest publishers, song publishers in the United States. But in the 30s, his work declined, and by the 50s, he retired altogether. But this song, it's the only song in our group that was written specifically for a female vocalist, and it was the song pays tribute to broken-hearted widows of the disaster. And here to sing it for us is Caitlin Doak. Come on up.
So when I first looked at the lyrics is what I looked at first, and it started out very happy and peaceful, and then when I got to the refrain, I was struck by how sad and heartbreaking the lyrics were, but it's also tragically beautiful, and it reminded me a lot of a church hymn back in the olden days. So it's a nice change of pace for me to sing something like this. It's a good challenge and it's refreshing, so I'm excited to share it with you guys.
Stately and proud, gay
The next piece is the first of two pieces called The Wreck of the Titanic. They are both descriptive musical sketches. This piece from 1912 is written by Haydn Agard, copyright Lawrence Wright Music Company of London. This is what's called salon music. Salon music is a short romantic piece used to demonstrate the emotions of a lead character, usually a fictional character, or to tell a story through an emotional piano solo to demonstrate the player's prowess, mainly for small gatherings in private homes, often played by the party hosts themselves, mainly just to show off their own skill. The style originated in the 1860s during the American Civil War, and they are often longer pieces than this one, but they continued until around the First World War when they more or less died out altogether. Haydn Agard is one of almost 70 pseudonyms for musician Charles Arthur Rawlings. Charles was the son of a blind piano tuner in London who learned music through him and from an aide at a local orphanage who assisted the family. Throughout his career, Charles wrote hundreds of songs, but none of them have lasted through the years. This is perhaps the first time in almost a century any of his pieces were performed or recorded.
From a performing aspect, this is an interesting thing, and I know when Carrick comes up to do the next Wreck of the Titanic, performing these are very strange. It's not an art form or a style that exists anymore, and just seeing it on a piece of paper, seeing the music, and then just lines. It's a very odd thing, but it's fun to explore the history of this. So let's give it a shot.
Afloat on the ocean blue. The ship's bell rings for the departure of the Titanic. Cheers. Goodbye. Smoothly sailing. Dance on board, the sailor's two-step. Crash. An iceberg, full speed astern. Too late. Excitement on board. Lower the boats, the captain cried. Women and children first. Lowering the lifeboats. Nearer, my God, to thee. Sung on board the doomed ship. The Carpathia arrives and saves many lives. Buried at sea.
This is the second piece, titled The Wreck of the Titanic, also a descriptive musical sketch. This one from 1912 is written by William Baltzell. Copyright Aubrey, Stouffer and Company of Chicago. The cover illustration of this piece is a collage of various scenes relating to the Titanic. We see the famous advertising painting used on postcards of the Olympic is utilized and rotated onto its side to give the impression of the ship capsizing. Above it is an image from Le Petit Journal of the ship hitting the iceberg head on. Captain Smith is at the top right, and a sketch of an escaping lifeboat at the bottom right. Despite their absence on the cover, which leads us to believe this piece was very much rushed, this piece is centered on the ship's musicians, with the first musical images being of the songs resounding from the promenade deck, bringing out the joy in the passengers. After the last lifeboats have left, the ship goes down with our attention on the musicians playing with water up to their knees. However, death is only hinted at in this song. In fact, the song ends on a high note. "Saved at last," the narrator cries when the Carpathia arrives. The end page of this has a dedication, quote, "In memoriam to the brave musicians who played the last requiem for the passengers of the Titanic." And Carrick, you'll be doing this one. Why don't you step on up here?
Yeah, very similar to what James said. The trick with doing this is that this art form of oration over music is so foreign to us that when I was looking into it and practicing it, my mind was trying to fix it and do what I know how to do, and it doesn't work. So it's very unusual. The second thing that's really interesting about it is, I don't know, I think the thing that kind of keeps bringing people back to Titanic for 106 years now is every couple of years something like this pops up. There's always something new, there's always something different, there's always something we didn't know. And the third thing, I think, which stands out the most to me is it is always remarkable that human beings use art to deal with grief. And when you think of something like Titanic, which has kind of been mythologized a little bit today, when you realize that the way they dealt with tragedy is exactly the same way we deal with tragedy today, it kind of humanizes it, reminds you of the humanity of it, that human beings do not change and society does not change. So that's kind of what I've learned from it, and let's give it a go.
Sailing, sailing over the bounding main. Echoes from the orchestra on the promenade deck. Every soul is happy. No one dreams of danger. Full speed ahead in the fields of ice. Strikes an iceberg. The ship stops. Bells ring from the bridge. Foghorn sounds. Passengers are warned. The lifeboats are lowered. The captain orders women and children first. Confusion reigns aboard. The ship is sinking. band, knee-deep in water, play their last prayer. The Titanic slowly sinks beneath the waves. The freezing survivors in lifeboats scan the ocean for assistance. Carpathia appears on the horizon. Saved at last. That one is so much better.
For the next two pieces, we're actually going to step away from the Titanic for a moment, and with this one specifically, we're going to jump back 50 years or so to the Great Eastern. The Great Eastern was a ship built by Isambard Kingdom Brunel, an engineer in Britain in the 1830s, 40s, 50s. This piece is written to be performed aboard the Great Eastern, and this artifact actually did sail aboard it. There are a small handful of copies of this piece in existence, perhaps 4 or 5, most of which are in museums or archives. It's often cited as being from 1859 for use during the maiden voyage of the ship. However, if you look at the song list on the reverse side, you'll find a number of songs in favor of both the Union and the Confederacy in the American Civil War, dating the piece to be after 1861. However, when the Civil War ended and the Confederacy lost, the ship owners would have had all songs sympathizing with the Confederacy no longer available and reprinted it without them on the back. This was in an effort to avoid ruffling any feathers between passengers who would have been supporting either side or opposing sides during the war. Therefore, this piece must also be from before 1865, narrowing it down to being specifically from during the American Civil War, which was an event that really damaged the career of the Great Eastern. The ship stopped doing transatlantic crossings in the late 1860s or early 1870s. Now, as far as I'm aware, there are no recordings of this song, so this is likely the very first time this song has been performed in about 150 years.
That last song was a cheery piece played aboard the Great Eastern during its voyages, but this next one is stepping back to disasters, maritime disasters. However, we are still not returning to the Titanic just yet. This is another nearly as famous disaster as the Titanic, the sinking of the RMS Lusitania in 1915. Written by Charles McCarran and Nathaniel Vincent, copyright Leopold Feist of New York. We can date this song to having been written within 2 weeks of the disaster, as the first and only time it was recorded was May 20th, 1915, only 13 days after the sinking. Columbia Records recorded it with baritone singer Albert Wiederhold, using the pseudonym Herbert Stewart, perhaps to hide his German ethnicity. The writers of the song were Tin Pan Alley writers Charles McCarran and Nathaniel Vincent. Both have achieved a modicum of success and wrote other songs that some collectors and historians may recognize, but the average listener would not. They were heavily criticized for this piece specifically. With such a basic tune that doesn't really fit the mood of the disaster, it's said that this piece could have been written in 15 minutes, and it most likely was. And therefore, it was interpreted as insincere and a cash-in on the disaster.
This one is, from a musical standpoint, from a performance standpoint, it is a very cheery tune for being what it is. The ending, particularly, it doesn't have, it's not, the ending is, when the Lusitania went down, and because of the way it's written, it sounds like it should be, when the Lusitania went down, and like that's obviously not appropriate, but that is the sound of it. It's interesting to do a song like this that is so detached from its subject matter, but there is an old Broadway musical called This Is the Army that was on Broadway just during World War II, to raise money, war bonds and all that. But all of the songs are very patriotic, very march-oriented, and the original production had something like 300 actual soldiers on stage singing. So, and this it sounds a lot like this, so maybe they were going for a more patriotic, uplifting thing, but that's up to interpretation. So let's give it a shot.
Statue of Liberty
just such a, the whole thing has to be, you know, it's just got to be that way, otherwise it's... Our last live performance is the band played Nearer My God to Thee as the Ship Went Down, a very catchy title, very long title. Words are by Mark Beam and music by Harold Jones. Copyright the Joe Morris Music Company in New York. So this song, this is one that we just added, actually. I gave this to Jake yesterday, and he is great and learned it real quick. So like many pieces, and like many pieces that you've seen already, Near My God to Thee is incorporated in it. I mean, it's in the title. But this song helps solidify the legend that the band played Near My God to Thee as their last tune. Whether or not they did is up to you, I guess. Yeah, let's get a run through of this here. This is one of my favorites in the group, so I'm excited to do it.
On a peaceful night, through the starlight bright, there a good ship plowed her way. She was heading straight for the port of fate, ere the breaking of the day. Now our lips are stilled, and our eyes are filled, and our hearts with sorrow torn. But we'll sing of the brave and the lives they gave for the loved ones left to mourn. There the brave men stood as true heroes should, with their hearts in faith sublime, and their names shall be fond memory until the end of time. And the band was bravely playing the song of the cross and crown. Nearer, my God, to Thee, as the ship went down. There's no story told of true heroes bold that can dim the honor due to the martyrs brave in their nameless grave, 'neath the ocean's waves of blue. And in future years, when are dried the tears of the ones that bear their name, sweetest memories divine shall our hearts entwine for the glory of their fame. There the brave men stood as true heroes should, with their hearts in faith sublime, and their names shall be fond memory until the end of time. And the band was bravely playing the song of the cross and crown. Nearer, my God, to Thee, as the ship went down.
that was the final piece we have for you today. That was actually really cool for me because I've never heard any of these songs, and Matt and I, we were not around for the rehearsals of this, so this was the first time we really got to experience these songs. The first one of this entire set that I owned in the sheet music was the Great Eastern Polka, so that was probably the one that I was looking forward to the most, and I've been wanting to hear that for the longest. So I wanted to thank once more Carrick Osborne, Caitlin Doak for their amazing vocals on their two pieces, and once again also Jake Tursky for his phenomenal piano playing the entire time. He's been a real trooper, replaying parts as we needed to record them, and he never seemed to tire. And finally, James Penka, who has helped with numerous parts of the Titanic Honor and Glory project, as well as this. He basically arranged this entire thing. I sent him the music, and he got all of the musicians together, the location together, and made sure everyone rehearsed this really well, and on top of that, you did an amazing job with the vocals. So thank you again, Jim. And I'd also like to thank the Weston Playhouse in Weston, Vermont for letting us use their room, their piano, and basically giving us privacy to record this. So thanks again to everyone involved, and also Matt DeWinkler for coming up and operating one of the cameras, and Emma Van Zoomeren for operating the other one. So thanks again, and we are just going to close this on one final bonus piece. It will not be a live performance. This is a song that you guys probably do know. This is the most well-known Titanic song from the time period of the disaster. It's actually about a decade later, from the 1920s. I'm going to actually play this for you on my 1912 Victor talking machine. This recording was made in 1925. It was one of the biggest hits of the 1920s, apparently one of the first songs to sell over 1 million copies. I think the next song after that was in the 40s, and it was Chattanooga Choo Choo. So it just goes to show how big this song was at the time. It's kind of bluegrassy, and it is actually commonly sung by the Boy and Girl Scouts, and is played by the University of California Marching Band when they march up to Memorial Stadium. This song was written by Ernest Stoneman. He found a poem in a newspaper around the time of the Titanic disaster, and he put it to a tune, as he says. And he got the credit for it, but interestingly enough, it turns out that that poem was written by another blues singer at the time named Carson Robinson, who used a pseudonym. So there was a little bit of drama in writing of this song. So we're going to close on this one, and thank you all. We'll see you in the next video. It is called The Sinking of the Titanic by George Renaud, 1925.